Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to Sacred Space Sunday with
Yes.
me, Naomi Jewel, and Mark Christmas.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Niyah Center, Engage, Educate, and Empower. Right. We'll bring you today on this. But sunny. It's not that warm now today. It's been warm up until today here in Maryland, November 13th. Uh, Mid-November, though. Mid-November, a lot happening in the world.
Big week in the United States.
Yeah, you were traveling this week, right?
I was traveling. I just returned earlier this early morning from Louisville, Kentucky. I practice saying it as people who live and are from Louisville say it, and I'm close, but it's not it. It's not
Louisville.
it.
It's Louisville. This is running together. Louisville. That's it. That's how you say it. Louisville.
But I'm telling you,
You sound like Carla.
you're approximating it, but you don't sound like they sound either. There's a drawl that comes with it that you don't quite have. So you're close, but that's not the genuine article either.
Only you hear that though, because you're not from there. People that there, they don't hear that. They don't think there's a drawl that goes with it. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I don't know. Maybe I wasn't in Louisville last night having this conversation with people who were born and raised there. Maybe you were.
I went to school. I had very good classmates that were my dorm mates, always in my room at FAMU that were from Louisville. I had two of them, Will and Dave Cosby and Bill Lacey.
Yes.
So
And
I
my
know
good friend
then when we would drive back to Chicago.
From there. I'm just
drive back
saying
to
that I
Chicago for
heard
school.
the accent last night. I heard it last night.
Oh my goodness.
You're
Well,
remembering from I won't say how many years ago.
Well, I get it's 1987 to 91, so like that. 35 years ago. 30. And then we would also stop in Louisville when we would drive back and forth to school because one of our classmates' grandmother lived there, and we stopped and she'd always cook us a meal. So spent a lot of time in Louisville.
Shout out to Louisville.
Shout out to Louisville, home of the champ.
And I did visit the Ali Center this week, and it was my first time. And if you get the chance and you pass through Louisville, you must check in on the champ. They've got a wonderful center there that's interactive. You can get into a boxing ring. You can literally shadow box with the champ.
Get out of here. You can box
with the greatest of all time. You can shadow box with the greatest of all time.
Is it like at the amusement parks you got to pay extra fee to do that?
No. What you just pay the one admission fee, and then everything else is available to you. There's no extra fees. Wow. And you can watch the old boxing matches. They're running, so you can see the original matches. But that's only one aspect of the center. The center also recounts and walks through his spiritual journey. It's an interreligious space. And so there is all kinds of wonderful quotations and of many traditions, and the things that we talk about here on this program are captured on the oneness across traditions, the shared values and ethics that cross traditions. And it recounts his own spiritual journey and his love for humankind. A lot of the things that we're talking about today and were talked about at the reason I was in Kentucky for the Festival of Faith. So I highly recommend, if you go to Louisville, it's a must see.
See, you said it different. You say Louisville. You putting too much emphasis on the it. Louisville, just Louisville. Louisville. It's almost like it's not a middle syllable. Louisville. Good morning, Auntie Grand Rising, Jedi, Dean, and Cheryl DC Joy. We missed you last Sacred Space Sunday. Good to have you back.
Good morning, everybody.
Wakanda forever.
That's right. Cheryl DC Joy saw that Wakanda and gave it 2 thumbs up. So I look forward to seeing it soon.
Speaking of that, Joy Reid had Angela Bassett on as a guest Friday, talking about it and the role that women, in particular, the role that they played in that movie in terms of dealing with Chadwick Boseman's not being there anymore and how they had to step up and they said they cried every day on the scene on the set. Very powerful, I understand, but very powerful women roles in this movie. So looking forward to seeing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Where are we? So you already did the introduction.
Yeah, we're talking about birthdays. We got some birthdays. We got Mom birthday coming up in Chicago. Kendall Logan had a birthday yesterday.
Terrell Soul Connors had a birthday yesterday as well. Happy birthday.
Yes, we say happy birthday to all those who have birthdays in the month of November. My dear Nana made her transition, had birthday this month. So if you've got somebody that you want us to send a happy birthday shout out to, drop it in the chat. We'd be happy to shout them out. So happy birthday to all.
Cheryl, who deserves an Oscar? Angela Bassett?
Okay. Let us know.
Yeah. That's a big statement. Well, I mean, it's getting a lot of excitement from all types of races and creeds. So I think that, I mean, it's one that speaks to the power of Marvel, but also, I think for me, outside of the Brown Hornet, it's the only black superhero that I can remember seeing, unless you want to count Black Adam more recently. But around the whole culture of a black nation and a superpower, I think it's just the first of it, and maybe the only of that type. Shout out to Wakanda. I remember when I was in professional service sales, and we had a meeting, and we said we was gonna come out the meeting, go into the meeting. It was a meeting with a housing complex who were going into pitching our services, and we all did the Wakanda sign. That's when we went in. So very powerful, very, 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 very powerful imagery and messaging. So Wakanda forever. Shout out to Chadwick Boseman. All right. Where else? The next Sacred Space Sunday is our bi-weekly shared space for spiritual growth and learning. We draw insights from sages of the past and present, inspired texts, ancient wisdom teachings, ethical principles that light the path to individual and collective insight, application, and spiritual enlightenment. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We don't have a specific topic as we normally do, but we're going to recap what Naomi was doing over this last week, right? So, Naomi, tell us a little bit about where you were and what was happening besides the Ali Museum in Louisville.
Sure. I would, before we jump into our discussion, I would like to just take a moment to just formally and officially arrive in the space and invite us all into a moment of presence, and then do a quick affirmation, and then get into this conversation that I've been in all week about sacred stories and interreligious engagement.
Yeah, let's take a moment.
So, take a moment to find your breath, to relax your eyes if it's comfortable, whether that be to close them or to simply have a low gaze. Roll back and relax your shoulders, releasing all that has come before this very moment. Noticing the breath as it moves through our nostrils. Seeing with our third eye the rise and fall of the belly. And this morning, in recognition of the breath of life, I invite you to breathe in empathy and breathe out compassion. Breathe in silently, saying to yourself, empathy. Breathing out, saying silently to yourself, compassion. I invite you to do a couple of rounds of this sacred mantra. Let's just take another moment to luxuriate in the spaciousness, finding the spaciousness between thoughts and breaths. I want to close today's practice with a sacred Hindu sound that is said to capture the pure vibrational voice of God, Allah, Yahweh, Source. So join me in 3 verbal out loud enunciations of Om. Amen, Amen, Ashe, Namaste, and so it is. How did it feel to recite Om, Mark?
I haven't done that in a while. It felt good. Oh, I forgot. I'm vibrant. Look, you used the word in the meditation. Luxuriate. What is that?
Just to experience the lusciousness, luxury.
Is that this LSAT vocabulary coming out? Or was that the doctor of philosophy?
It was God. It was the word that came to me. It was the word that God sent in a moment.
Let us luxuriate in the moment. I love made me smile during the session. So thank you for doing that. Felt good to own. As I said, I feel the vibrations in my hand still. Um, such a
It's
powerful,
powerful, right?
word, right?
Right. It
And
is.
some
It
of the
is said to be
recommendations.
the sound of the divine, and I feel it when I say it.
Yeah. Sometimes when during Reiki meditations, we use 3 ohms as well. When we're doing it with some of the different symbols, just looking to get divine download on what are those, the meaning, experience of those symbols. So, thank you for that. Wow, what a week! What a
Yeah.
week! Yeah,
So we
you
have an
know,
affirmation.
yeah. I was say we didn't do the affirmation.
Yep. You want to read it?
Yeah, let me get it.
Family, we are here with you, and as I said, I just flew from Louisville this morning, and so we ask for your grace and patience this morning as we are here with you, and
Yes. So the affirmation for today and the next week and a half, 2 weeks, you can repeat it after me as I said out loud. I am
I am
conscious of the inner presence of God
conscious of the inner presence of God
as my infinite source
as my infinite source
and supply.
and supply.
I accept that oneness,
I accept that oneness,
love of self and others,
love of self and others,
and joy
and joy
is my birthright.
is my birthright.
So I don't know if you I guess listening, you can't take a picture of it, but if you're watching it, you can take a picture of the affirmation that's on the screen. And our request is that you just repeat it over the course of the on a daily basis. Put it somewhere you can see it and just say it out loud, because we know that when you speak it out loud to the universe, it helps to bring it forth. So let me say it one more time. I am conscious of the inner presence of God
Conscious of the inner presence of God
as my infinite source
as my infinite source
and supply.
and supply.
I accept
I accept
that oneness,
that oneness,
love of self and others,
love of self and others,
and joy
and joy
is my birthright.
is my birthright.
Awesome.
Ashe.
Oh, yes, it is. You endeavor yoga with on. Okay, sure. OHM.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So now, yes, let's talk about what I've been up to this week. So I attended the Festival of Faiths, and it was in its 26th year, but first time meeting again in such a manner since the pandemic in 2020. And it is a nationally acclaimed interfaith event, a true interfaith event of music, poetry, film, art, and dialogue. And it features a very diverse lineup of leaders, teachers, and practitioners across traditions. And the festival's goal is to honor the union between thinking globally and acting locally. So it was brought together by a group of people interested in the care and the well-being of society some 26 years ago. And each year has a different theme, and they draw panelists from across the country from various walks and disciplines and beliefs and traditions, and to come together, to just grow and learn together. And I'm looking here because they've got a wonderful, yes. And so their slogan for their organization is many faiths, one heart, common action. Many faiths, one heart, common action. So that's the spirit, and that was truly the spirit of every individual I met at this conference. And this year's theme was sacred stories, contemplation, and connection. Um, so yeah, so that was what I was up to, and I presented on a panel. It was started, opened Wednesday evening, and there were a full day of panels on Thursday, Friday, and it completed on Saturday. And my particular panel was on Friday morning, Thy Neighbor, Faith, Politics, and Radical Acceptance. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But all of the different panels and discussions are available right now on YouTube. If you look up the Festival of Faiths, you will not only find this year's all of the different sessions, but previous years. So check it out. We will drop a link in the chat to a couple of the sessions that I enjoyed most, but I would offer that you watch them all, because this is amazing content for free right now on YouTube. Mark?
I think it's interesting that, because it said thinking globally and acting locally. And so, so what that means to me is thinking about the world at large. Think, how do we change the world? We do it right where we're seen, even though we aren't all everywhere in the world. And one thing that comes to mind when you think about this is the resources to put it together. And so part of being able to act is also having resources. They talked about that with the runoff race that's happening in Georgia. You need resources to run a election campaign, right? And so it's good to have well wishes, but you need to have some money behind it as well. And that usually is a big piece of it. And so shout out to was it Brown Foreman family?
Yep. Brown family.
The who?
Brown.
Oh, just Brown, not Foreman. Okay.
Foreman's a different family.
Is it? Oh, okay. I was thinking of the company.
Like Christmas Jewel.
Okay. For putting resources over the last 26 years behind us to help make it possible as well. They were big sponsors of the event.
So Brown Foreman was a sponsor, as well as the Brown family, and the Fetzer Institute were big sponsors. Kentucky Center, they had lots of sponsors, but Brown Foreman organization, the Brown family, Fetzer Institute are major sponsors.
Yeah. So it speaks to the importance of developing relationships, and those of you who are nonprofit can certainly probably relate to this. But without resources, the best ideals just would stay where they are as good ideas without bringing them forth into action. So those that are thinking about supporting the organization, even if it's Niyah Center, right? Please send your resources to support that, because they depend on those resources to make them real, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing when you're doing the work and you're in a nonprofit organization. Yes, it is through the support of others that the work happens, and that it happens in a way that it can have the full impact. We say, we've been said all week, we can only do it together. And so your support and love donations literally make all the difference in terms of the impact and influence and reach that we and organizations like the Festival of Faiths can have. So, Mark, you were going to talk a little bit about what I talked about, and I'll put the link up while you do that.
Yeah. So your particular segment was Thy Neighbor, Faith, Politics, and Radical Acceptance, which was co-created with the Omega Institute. Shout out to Carla. I can't think of Carla's last name. What's the Carl's name? Naomi
Goldstein.
Goldstein, right? President of the Omega Institute, right? And so, in the context of an increasingly polarized country, right? Polarized on so many fronts, two ends of the stick. We said it totally, we saw this in the elections, right? Uh, with the Roe versus Wade, the women's rights, voters' rights, and different things of that nature, Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives, all of these versus puts us at odds against each other. And so, if you look at what took place this week during the elections, and on Veterans Day, we'll explore the challenging concepts of love of thy neighbor and radical acceptance, right? So during Naomi's, your panel, you talked about the framework for building a more healed, connected, loving, and just community. And we want to reflect on the possibilities with neighbors in our own lives, right? And so I just had a little reading on loving thy neighbor. So there's two verses actually. One is Matthew 5:44. It says, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven." Right. And then if you read a little bit further down in Matthew to chapter 22, verses 36 through 40, it says, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And he said unto them, this is a conversation the disciples are having with Jesus. And he said unto them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So now you and I had an interesting off-camera discussion around loving the neighbor as yourself. And you put in a word, I think an interesting word, loving as your God self, right? As a interpretation of that. We were talking about loving the person. And when I think of love, agape love, God loves us, he wants the best for us, right? And he may not always agree with our actions, but he still loves us, right? And you said that something maybe is big wolfy love. I mean, that big wolf, shout out. What's up, big wolf, too? Ego love, when I'm saying self. So explain what you meant when you say love of your God self.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the center of my entire talk, is that when love is being referred to in the sacred text of the Bible, it's not the form of romantic love. It's agape love, which is the universal love. This is the love of compassion, the love of empathy. This is the love of all beings. And so when we are being invited to love our neighbor as ourselves, first of all, who is our neighbor? Our neighbor is all creation, all beings, all nature, God. So our neighbor is all beings. And to love our neighbor as ourselves, my talk started with that before you can get to universal love of others, you've got to first love yourself. If you don't love yourself, there's no way you can love others. And to love yourself is to love God. To love God is to love yourself, because there is no distinction there. That is one. So when you're loving your neighbor, you're loving and as you love yourself. That's oneness. That is knowing that your neighbor is a reflection of you, because your neighbor is also a manifestation of God. They're God's self. So you're loving the God within them as the God within you, right? Because in that you are connected. In that you're both manifestations of God. To hate them is to hate yourself, because within them is God. Now you can separate loving the God self and loving your neighbor as yourself from loving all of their actions and their behaviors. Those are distinct. Jesus spoke out against behaviors that were not quote unquote righteous, overtly and explicitly. So Jesus didn't love everything humans did, and loved them because he understood that we are all extensions of the one. And so that's the call there, which is why I think that second verse is really helpful. To just read love thy neighbor as thyself, people can really get confused. And so that's why I really like the Matthew 5:43 through 46, which says, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. For God makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous, because God does not distinguish from itself. But we have free will. Free will gives us that ability to go and do whatever, things that are not in alignment with God. And so
Right.
God is not saying yes to the things that you do that are not in alignment, and is giving you free will to do that. But God still loves you because you are it.
Yeah. All right. So your panel, talk a little bit about who made up your panel. There's one particular person I want to play an excerpt of one of the artists that was on your panels, but who else was on your panel?
So Carla Goldstein of the Omega Institute, she was the person who hosted and curated the panel. And so you can find out more about each of these speakers by going online. So the other speakers were John Gable, myself, Courtney Martin, and John Gable is a business person, someone who's got a lot of knowledge of technology and is thoughtful about that and how it can enhance instead of take away from social relations. Courtney Martin, who is a author and a feminist and a mother, and she talked about how we can all, in the educational system, how can we create educational systems where those who are leading the educational system have love for all children? How can teachers love all children as their own? Again, loving their neighbor as themselves, regardless of whether or not those children reflect them. So how can white teachers love Black children the same way they love their own children? And then Vivian William Karutz, who is the founder and director of the Harlem Wellness Center. She spoke. And lastly, Hannah Drake, who is an activist and artist.
Yeah, and I just want to speak a little bit about Hannah. Hannah was very active with the Breonna Taylor situation in Louisville. She's also in that Muhammad Ali Center. She's named her Daughter of Greatness, right? Which is features prominent women engaged in social philanthropy and activism, right? She was selected as the best of the best in Louisville for one of her poems called Spaces, and was honored as a Kentucky Colonel. But I want to play just to give you a little bit of background. The Omega Institute is a retreat center in Rhinebeck, New York. And so a friend of Hannah's reached out to Carla to ask her if she could, send her up there to get some rest after, a couple of grueling years with the pandemic and all the social activism and stuff that was happening around the country, but particularly in Louisville with Breonna Taylor's situation. So this is Hannah speaking on the panel at the beginning.
Our relationship is not done yet. I'm not, I just knew somehow that I was going to be connected to her. I didn't know for what, and even today it's not done. But that's how you know instinctively that somebody is your neighbor. I know that I'm supposed to know Carla in order to do something. So this is a road to that. So there are two things I want to quickly tell you. One, about mindfulness. We just go and go and go and do the work, and you don't stop. And while I was at Omega, that this beautiful mural on, and first of all, and I love LaTanya, but she put me like half a mile from the cafeteria. And so in order to eat, you have to walk half a mile there and half a mile back, which was good for my spirit and physical. needs. But I was like, Latanya, girl, come on. You know? But walking there, I would walk past the mural every single day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I would just stare at this mural, and I took pictures of the mural, and I would admire it. And as the week I was leaving, it was of this garden, this beautiful garden. And it dawned on me, wait a minute. This is a mural of the garden, the actual garden you're walking through every day. And you need to pause because you're fascinated with this mural and you're overlooking the fact that you are actually walking through that garden every single day, 3 times a day. And I never took the time to pause and notice. So that was a note for me about being mindful about everything that's going on around you, that you don't have to just admire the pictures or just talk about being a neighbor and about love. It's all around you. It's happening all around you everywhere. We just need to take a minute to pause and see that. And I will read you all this poem because as I'm walking my half mile every day, and there's this road, beautiful road, and I went in October, so the leaves were changing, and I would stare at this road every single day. And this is the road, so I'd stare. Isn't this beautiful? So I'd stare at this all the time. And when I got back, this very short poem came to me, and I sent it to Carla, and then I'll hand it back over to you. And the poem is just called The Road. This is a road that we must walk together. Unsure of what is before us, we walk. The road at times appears daunting, and we will want to quit. We will grow tired, and our bodies are sore. We will say that the journey is too long, and we will complain that this walk is taking too much time. We will weep for those that we had to leave behind, but we cannot remain here. We must walk. The road will not always look this way. A painful hidden history often lurking in the shadows. Clouds will roll in, storms will come, bringing with it winds of sadness, hurt, anger, confusion, and pain. But a new day is always on the horizon. A new day is there if we look for it. With every step, a new day awaits us. So we must find a way to walk together, for we cannot travel this road alone. Roads are not made for one. This road is wide enough for us all. We simply have to believe that the journey is worth it. Thank you.
Very powerful poem. Hannah Drake, thank you. Shout out. The road, right? And so, the love thy neighbor was one of the things, and radical acceptance was the other. And, I got to thinking about what is this? Radical in particular is a word that's gained a lot of usage. Did some research on, it's up, I don't know how many thousands of percentage points since 1935. But radical actually comes from the root of radicalis, which means like the roots of trees. That's what the word originally meant. You may know. I had a student that was using this. He's like, I want to do radical numbers. I was like, what is he talking about? And he's like, well, it's a square root, right? And so it's a term associated with the word root. But recently, and not just in the past year or two, but past 10 years, there's been a lot of concepts around radical honesty. There's a lot of thought leadership around radical honesty. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of my time on what is radical acceptance. And so, I think about, you may have heard this phrase, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? And so basically it says suffering arises from not accepting the pain, right? And so what makes this quote helpful is that not only does it discern the difference between pain and suffering, 2 concepts we often use interchangeably, even though they're not, but it also recognizes our unique power in the face of challenges, right? And the difference is crucial. It can save potentially our lives and our relationships. And so I want to talk a little bit about radical acceptance. One of the things that I found, it says radical acceptance is accepting what is not under your control and embracing what is happening now in a non-judgmental way. right? And so now go back to our conversation around loving thy neighbor that we had a few minutes ago, loving who they are, but maybe not loving their actions, right? So loving, one that might be having a diverse opinion than mine, but not necessarily sharing their opinion. And without naming any names, I'll just put that out there as a concept, right? But I think the challenge in the radical acceptance is to refrain from the judgment, because the judgment is what gets us all spent up, right? And then the emotions get attached, and it starts this whole spiral. So this concept of radical acceptance, I think, is pretty powerful, particularly in the face of all that's happening in the world, right? And if we can really not take judgment into our interactions with people, our observations of situations, it can reduce the suffering that they cause, right? And so you might not like something that somebody is doing, but you don't have to suffer it through it if you can just accept it without judgment. So it's my take on radical acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think that's correct and exactly it, right? It's to release the judgment, because that's a spiritual practice. Releasing judgment is spiritual practice, because if we believe what we say we believe, right, and that we're all divine manifestations of God, then judgment is not ours. It's just not, it's not our place. Now, I do it, and I know I'm not alone. Um, and that doesn't mean that it's right. It certainly doesn't mean that it's righteous, and it doesn't change anything. But it does make me feel not good inside. So the only thing it changes is me, and it might change the energy in the room, which then changes other people. So I'm not sure what productive value judgment has. Action in support of things. Again, if you've heard me once, you heard me a million times. I'm insight plus application equals results. I'm by no mean a pacifist, right? But productive action, righteous action, divine action, because other forms of action, I can't say we have the saying, it feels good in the moment, but we know it's not good. But I really question that. Does it really feel good in the moment? Does it really feel good in the moment? It might feel like the thing we really want to do in the moment. We might feel right and righteous about what we're doing, but it doesn't really feel good in our body in the moment. Right?
Well, paying attention to those feelings. I mean, that's what Abraham Hicks talks about, is just paying attention to the feelings. When you say something, when you're doing something, when a thought comes to you, what is the feeling that's associated or connected to that? Because that's what it is therefore attracting, right? And so I think that's an important part. The radical acceptance reminds me of the serenity prayer, which says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference, right? Wisdom to know the difference.
Right there.
Yeah.
That's why. Fundamental and foundational. The other way that it's said is there's my business, your business, and God's business. And you would do yourself a service to understand the distinction between all three: my business, your business, and God's business. And there's a whole lot out there that's God's business that we take as ours.
Yeah.
So Big Wolf 2 had a comment that I put up. I'm gonna put it back up here. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, this is why the self-love piece is critical. Because if you're constantly judging yourself, then of course you're going to judge other people. Let me say that again. If you're judging yourself, of course you're going to judge other people. So if you don't love yourself, then it's really hard really impossible to really love other people. You can't do something you don't really understand. How can you really understand how to love someone else if you don't really even understand how to love yourself? You don't know what that is, right? And so it all begins with loving ourselves. And for some of us, because of the baggage we're carrying, it may be easier, and why we emphasize so much on Sacred Space Sunday and so much through the Niyah Center, that our self is our infinite self, our God self, so that we don't get hung up on the imperfections, those things that are our limits, and the ways that we miss the mark as physical beings, as sentient beings, but to remember that we're also infinite beings, and that we can always love that every day and in always, and from that love our whole person, right? Knowing that each breath is a new moment for new choices and new beginnings, which is also why we center the breath so much, and why we really get the breath of life, because that's what it is. It's given this new moment life, a new moment, new choice, a new moment, new choice, new moment, new choice, and the infinite new moments and new choices you have each day.
Yeah. Say preach. Yeah, that's the MDiv, Reverend Minister Doctor Lawyer Esquire. Uh, um,
Yes, this right here, this serenity prayer. Yeah, but I'm glad you brought that
I
back
know
in.
when I first would came aware of the Serenity Prayer, there'd be some days I may say it hundreds of times. Like even in the hour, I may say it. Every minute I found myself saying, and I was struggling with that. And I remember talking to a guy, I was like, about a situation. He's like, "Well, it sounds like you battling with against acceptance. Acceptance is the key to peace." And it sounded like something fancy at the time. I didn't really understand that, but as I start to look towards acceptance and really ingest it and live it, I did find myself having peace, free from struggling, right? Because I wasn't struggling with my judgment or opinion or what I thought others were saying and meant. But I was just able to have some acceptance with whatever the situation was, whoever the individual was, without looking to judge them or change them, right? And so, with the judgment comes, I think, a desire to want to change. When you're judging it, you're saying it's not right or it's not good. Therefore, let me fix it or attempt to influence it. And then I'm trying to have you believe as I believe, or you see it the way I see it. Whereas no peace in that, because it's like just like an uphill battle. And so the concept of radical acceptance, I think, is really powerful. I didn't see the whole panel, so I don't remember much around what was said around radical acceptance on the panel. Do you anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of different things. Each person embodied the way, radical acceptance showed up in their own space, and so I encourage each of you to listen to the panel. And if you listen to it, over the course of next 2 weeks, one panelist at a time. If you don't have time to sit down and watch the whole thing, so the Festival of Faiths meets every year, and it's open and welcome to the public. And keeping in mind that if you aren't able in the future to go there physically, they do live stream each panel as it's going on, so that you can feel, part of the space at that time, and then immediately send them to YouTube. So as part of a spiritual practice, here's another space, another way to hear some diverse voices talking about how we can move in this world in a way that feels good. A lot of people right now are struggling, and the things in the world are weighing on folks, and people may be smiling and they may have a kind word, and I offer family that we look beyond that and into their eyes and into their hearts. And really, it is more important than ever before that we are loving our neighbors, because we're many of us are not doing well, and we're not alone. And so and people don't know how to overcome it or what resources are available to them. And so these talks are inspiring And so, they're different voices because different hear things from different people. To hear the same messages from different traditions, I think is encouraging and uplifting, to let people know these are universal principles that are bigger than any one religion, bigger than any one person, bigger than any one speaker, and that they really have the power to transform. And so here are some other tools that are available to you through the click of your computer, where we can be using technology to serve us, where we're getting some messages, not these negative messages that we're getting from all of these new programs. I don't care which periodical or which television show that you watch or which network is your favorite. These messages overall are not uplifting. And so I'm offering some other voices. Like I said, the theme here was sacred stories. So what are the stories that we're filling our head with? Is it the stories from the timelines, our social media timelines? Is it the stories from these news broadcasters? Is it the stories from people in the world who aren't coming from a centered space, who are not operating in alignment, with their source? What are the stories that we're filling our minds with that are becoming our stories, either consciously or unconsciously? So here are some uplifting stories to kind of give you some different narratives to not only fill your mind and heart, but also your spirit.
Mm. So this concept of spiritual revolutionary, you used that during your talk, right? You said you call people co-conspirators and spiritual revolutionaries. You consider yourself a spiritual revolutionary.
I do. And this was really my invitation in the talk, was everything we've talked about today, I would say is radical, right? Accepting, the things you can and cannot change, and knowing the difference. That's radical. Our values here at the Niyah Center: oneness, love, and joy. These are radical principles. And loving your neighbor as yourself, and knowing that the God within us connects us all, and that our neighbor is all creation. In these days and times, these are all radical concepts, and I say, by embracing them, these spiritual truths, that these are revolutionary maneuvers, and that we are operating as spiritual revolutionaries. And I say we come from a lineage of spiritual revolutionaries that we know by name, and so many we don't, right? Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Jesus, the Prophet Muhammad, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Howard Thurman, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, all these people, spiritual revolutionaries who spoke truth, as they say, spoke truth to power, who came from a spiritual foundation, that were willing to say the hard things, and talk about believing in love, right? This agape love in a world that would say, there's no way. There's no way. We were in Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor has barely experienced any justice. And to be in that space and also be talking about love and agape love, some would say there's no way, not in that town. And yet it was a town filled with people who lived there, who were raised there, and people who came in, who saw and know injustice, who call out injustice, and are working towards a more just world, and doing it through love. Both can live in the same space. This is radical. This is what it means to be a spiritual revolutionary.
Yes, I think so many people sometimes associate revolutionary with like arms, or like what they did to storming the Capitol in January the 6th. And um, I don't think that's what I mean. There's revolutions, right? But you had the Industrial Revolution, which was just changing the world because of all the manufacturing. And you had the technology revolution, which is happening now, which is just change the pace of change with technology and devices and efficiencies and things of that is changing. But all revolutions don't equate to violence.
Well, this is the thing. We let people steal words and steal narratives and then define it and then accept their definitions. Everything that Jesus did was revolutionary. He was a poor Jew from Palestine who came to speak a message that was radically different than the message of his day. a message about love, a message about the least of these are the most worthy, a message that didn't care about all of the polarization that we have here, the poor against this poor, this community over that community. We can't sit with the Gentile. Was about breaking boundaries, about, you know, egalitarian lifestyle, meaning everyone gets to eat, sharing equally. That was revolutionary. There was no one talking about that. That was not the idea of the day. It was counter to everything. So this is a concept that has been appropriated, right? And such that we're scared to say it. And I am embracing myself as a spiritual revolutionary. And as I said in my talk, siblings and co-conspirators, I invite you into the revolution of oneness, love, and joy.
Awesome. Awesome. So do you have a Insight Plus application?
Yes, we do.
Of course we do. Would you mind sharing it with us?
We do. That's right. Right. We don't just talk about it. We like to be about it here at Sacred Space Sunday.
Your energy has sure come up.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what the energy of this program and all of the family that is sending us energy will do. So we say, let's put this to work. Let's put our spiritual revolutionary work out into the world. And so the invitation is during this 2 weeks, and I'm going to up this to 2 things since we're doing 2 weeks, right? You know, over 2 weeks, this is nothing. This is nothing, folks. This could be accomplished today. You do this today. This should be one a day. It should be one a day, but I'm going to say 2 things. 2 things in the next 2 weeks that demonstrate agape love for us. We talked about this before. This means something that demonstrates you being compassionate and empathetic across differences. You being compassionate and empathetic across differences. Something concrete that you say or that you do that is you being compassionate and empathetic across difference. 2 things in 2 weeks. Should be one a day. And 2 things in the next 2 weeks that reflect you choosing joy and happiness. Your own joy, to be joyful, to experience joy and happiness, despite circumstances. Any one of the circumstances that you could point to that aren't working, such and such is doing to you, or this ain't working right, money ain't right, whatever the circumstances are that will have you down in the dumps or lead you to possibly going into a judgment. The invitation is that instead you choose joy or happiness, despite the circumstances to the contrary. So at least twice in 2 weeks. Again, should be every day. This is easy stuff. This is the work. We're spiritual revolutionaries. This is who we are. This is what we do. But let's commit to at least 2 things in each category in 2 weeks.
Yeah. But when I was looking at that, I was thinking, I have a student who just shows up in my mind, and this is judgment of it now, with a funky attitude, you know. And I have to, before I get to the class, I have to shift. And his counselor asked me to hold him, view him as his highest possibility, even though he doesn't show up that way. And so that's what this reminds me of, is showing up and treating that student as if he is attentive and ready to learn and wants to be there and contribute.
Well, one of the women that I spent a lot of time with, who is a theologian, retired professor of 30 years in theology, talked about her interpretation of some of Jesus's teachings, and that the stewards of religions, ministers, reverends, and the like have somewhat lost sight of what their call and purpose is, and that their real call and purpose is to see the highest potential in other people. That is really the call of a minister, of what minister really means, to minister to. So someone who walks in the line and takes up the line of being a minister, whatever title you take on, but that work of ministry, that the role is to see the highest potential in others when they can't see it in themselves. So that's what's being called. I mean, teacher is a minister.
Yeah.
That's the call. That's the call. That's our work.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do at the Niyah Center. And
That's our God self, right? That's what God does. He's just, that's the beings he created.
Yep. Yep. And when we say yes, we're going to step into these roles, then that is actually the job description.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's
thank you.
simple. It may not be easy, but it is simple. Right.
I love that. May not be easy, but it is simple, people. There, you heard it. You heard it. Mark Christmas. All right, Mark Christmas. You have a closing prayer for us as it is 12:02.
Yeah, yeah. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you for this conversation today on loving our neighbors and radical acceptance. Thank you for the reality of God as us in human form, individualized form, and in human form, God is an extension in everyone in human form. That we should see each other as you see us, which is with love, wanting the best for each of us, right? Helping to support us, knowing that things will work out for us that love you, and will work together, even if the circumstances at the time doesn't seem to agree with that, right? Knowing that we're much greater than our circumstances and situations, knowing that the truth is that you are the source and supply of all that is, right? And the abundance of and the substance of that, of all that is, right? And we are grateful for those acknowledgments. We thank you as we go into our week, as you just cover us, and let your will be brought to the forefront of our minds and awareness and in our hearts as we live and interact with those other humans that we come in contact with, that we spread the spirit of love and loving our neighbors, and the agape love that be our lead and our go-to on a going basis. We appreciate your angels surrounding us, those that are traveling this week on the highways and byways or in planes. As I go to New York this weekend, to be with Madison and see her dance performance. Thank you for blessing that. And all those that are having birthdays, as you let them celebrate and be celebrated. Thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. And so it is. Next Sacred Space Sunday, 2 weeks from now. Is that? I think that's that after Thanksgiving, huh?
It is.
Yeah. And so we'll have to see what we do in there. Anything else?
That's it. So blessings to all. We send you oneness, love, and joy. Thank you, as always, for joining us here on Sacred Space Sunday. And we will see you back in 2 weeks in one way, shape, or form, inshallah.
Inshallah. Amen. Ashe, and so it is.
And so it is.